Fang Chen's heart suddenly leaped with a profound, silent astonishment. For upon the walls of the great Kaian Divine Kingdom's imperial palace, 3 divine trees were shockingly depicted. Yet this was merely a fragment of the whole. On the remaining walls, perhaps other divine trees were drawn. It was not impossible. Indeed, just as he had speculated. Those 3 patterns of destruction, under the influence of a domain's power, gradually intermingled and gave birth to an entirely new image. That image presented a mysterious realm of absolute void. An ancient shattered continent hung motionless between heaven and earth. It had long been broken apart, turned into countless fragments. Yet these fragments still barely clung together as one. Solely because 9 bizarre, colossal divine trees stood firm at the 9 corners of the world. Their roots each anchored a piece of the continental shard, gripping them fiercely to prevent them from drifting into the distant void. And above that shattered continent, a blood-red lightning pool churned with countless bolts of annihilating thunder. Streak after streak of crimson lightning cascaded down, savagely striking the 9 divine trees. Branches snapped, leaves scattered, and upon the trunks were left horrifying scorch marks. Fang Chen focused his gaze and saw that one of them was indeed the Taixu divine tree. It stood at the continent's center, reaching straight for the lightning pool, and endured the most ferocious bombardment of the blood lightning. Fang Chen looked curiously toward that blood-red lightning pool. What exactly could wound even the Taixu divine tree? Yet, with that single glance, it was as if some hidden existence within the blood pool was abruptly startled awake. The blood pool instantly ceased its assault. Boundless blood waters converged with astonishing speed, condensing into a single massive, blood-red eye. That enormous blood-hued pupil slowly rotated, and it looked directly at Fang Chen. Yes, across an immeasurably vast river of countless eons, that eye locked gazes with Fang Chen. Just that one look, in Fang Chen's mind, it was as if 10,000 claps of thunder erupted at once. His entire body convulsed violently, and his very soul seemed about to be blasted into a million scattered specks of light. In this critical moment, deep within his sea of consciousness, a frantic rustling sound suddenly erupted. It was the Taixu ancient tree stirring. And this time its reaction was unprecedentedly intense. The vision shattered at the sound. Only then did Fang Chen jolt awake from within it. His muscles still twitched softly beyond his control. The pain in his soul receded as swiftly as the tide. After 3 breaths, it vanished without a trace. Fang Chen, his face slightly pale and his eyes filled with lingering terror, murmured softly to himself, what was that feeling of near death just now? Could it all have been an illusion? His domain possessed the power to trace origins and summarize the core force of all things. The image from before was precisely revealing the truth of how the 9 divine trees had fallen to their current state. But that should have been an event from an utterly remote era. What he saw was merely a lingering scene left behind in the long river of history. That blood lightning, could it actually cross the river of history to lock onto him? This could only be an illusion, right? Just as he was convincing himself with this thought, he suddenly felt a searing pain at the back of his head. He turned to look, and his pupils could not help but shrink violently. Upon the body of his ancestral ring, visible only to himself, a blood-colored thunder mark had shockingly appeared. Around that mark, dense, fine cracks had spread. Fang Chen's mind went completely blank for a moment. The sensation, just now, it had actually been real. That eye had truly reached across the endless ages, wounding him from countless years in the past. What in the world was that thing? And furthermore, could the reason the Taixu ancient tree was reduced to a single seed and the immortal divine tree to a single leaf be precisely because of that blood pool? Could those countless continental fragments, firmly locked in place by the 9 divine trees, be the former Great Kaian Divine Kingdom? Could it be that the Great Kaian Divine Kingdom was destroyed by that very blood pool? A torrent of questions flashed through his mind like lightning. Sensing the many lingering auras, Fang Chen's gaze flickered, and he once more activated the 5th domain. In his mind, that image condensed into form once again. He dared not delve too deeply, merely letting it sweep over the surface. As the image faded, some fragmented text surfaced within his sea of consciousness. But those characters were far too broken, they could not be assembled into any complete content. Not even a few coherent sentences existed. Fang Chen could not help but feel speechless. No wonder the lone wolf sage was willing to bring this out for everyone to comprehend. It turned out the Tao, intent within these walls appeared profound, but was actually fragmented and incomplete, making true gain difficult. However, that might not be the case for Fang Chen, for his fifth domain could, from such broken texts, birth anew the core essence of the fragmented scripture. Sure enough, not long after, a complete text surfaced in his mind. The imitation chapter of the supreme clarity, vast righteousness art. Heaven and earth hold a righteous energy, vast and mighty, spanning past and present. Below, it bears the soul of mountains and rivers. Above, it connects to the spirit of sun and moon. A path of crimson heart and loyal blood, blade set against the setting sun. Fang Chen murmured this silently in his heart. The moment he finished reciting, he felt his divine platform clear and bright, and within his chest, a stream of vast, righteous energy quietly flowed. His face revealed an expression of delighted surprise, and he inwardly marveled, Confucian Dao Art. An outsider like me, yet upon first silent recitation, I am already filled with righteous energy, truly inconceivable. Regarding Confucian Dao Art, his deepest impression was naturally that the great Confucian school could use its vast righteous energy to make wishes. If he too could accumulate a vast amount of righteous energy, did that mean he would be able to wish his enemies into oblivion again, as he once did? This fragmentary chapter before him was on a level incomparably higher than the Confucian Dao arts of the Central Plains. Long-term cultivation would surely lead to extraordinary heights. Moreover, he could pass on this fragmentary chapter to the surviving Confucian cultivators of the Hunyuan province in the Central Plains. After the Hunyuan cataclysm, the Confucian tradition's deity transformation realm cultivators were nearly wiped out, their lineages utterly severed. This fragmentary chapter could surely allow the Confucian tradition to surpass its former glory. It could also serve as a small personal compensation from Fang Chen to the Confucian cultivators of Hunyuan. Who would have thought that by tagging along on an alliance's discussion event, he would snag a supreme Confucian Dao Art fragmentary chapter? Though it was an imitation chapter, its power inferior to the genuine article on the walls of the Great Kayan Divine Kingdom's palace, it was still absolutely a heaven-defying Dao Art that would shock the myriad heavens. Finishing his comprehension, Fang Chen looked toward the others with complete satisfaction. He wanted to see what they had gained. With that one glance, he realized something was amiss. Everyone was submerged in the Dao, intent of the broken walls, seemingly still in the process of comprehending. But upon closer inspection, their expressions were deeply wrong. Some were bewildered, some were struggling, and a portion even displayed expressions of agony. Yet none of them ceased their comprehension. Something was terribly wrong. It seemed their consciousness had been tightly imprisoned by the Dao, intent within the broken walls, utterly unable to break free. Fang Chen recalled how the infant had mentioned that the lone wolf sage's words about seeking aid were insincere, and his expression subtly changed. He swept his gaze sideways, and his heart grew even colder. He saw that the lone wolf and the 7 other sages had, at some unknown point, dispersed and arrayed themselves around the Myriad Sages from the Myriad Poisons realm. Killing intent flickered faintly in their eyes, as if they were waiting for some opportune moment. Not good. Fang Chen suddenly realized that the lone wolf sage, having sent away the local great sages under the pretense of seeking aid, was actually scheming against the Myriad Poisons realm. You actually woke up, a voice tinged with a hint of surprise suddenly rang out. The speaker was precisely the lone wolf sage. He was sizing Fang Chen up with an incredulous gaze. The Dao, intent within these broken walls, was exceedingly profound and mysterious. If one thrust their consciousness into it, freeing oneself required an extremely long time. But how much time had just passed? The sages of the Myriad Poisons realm were still deeply trapped, unable to extricate themselves, yet Fang Chen, a mere deity transformation cultivator, had been the first to awaken. What he did not know was that Fang Chen had never plunged his consciousness into it at all. He had relied entirely on his domain to comprehend. Thankfully, the other party was merely at the deity transformation stage. Killing him would be like crushing an ant. It could not possibly affect the grand scheme. The lone wolf sage stood with his hands clasped behind his back and spoke indifferently. Originally, I had no interest in you. What a pity you just had to wake up. Then I can only send you on your way. Before his words had fully faded, his gaze flashed. A solidified gaze, brimming with the power of gloomy, malevolent blood energy, instantly pierced through the void, shooting straight at Fang Chen. For this expert who had once been listed on the sacred scroll of the divine capital, killing someone at deity transformation required but a single glance. However, Fang Chen had prepared his defenses a step ahead. 12 pitch-black formation stones were already suspended around him. That incoming gaze, like a mud cow entering the sea, was completely absorbed. At the same moment, Fang Chen slapped a palm onto the shoulder of the heavenly poison sage beside him and shouted in a deep voice, "Wake up, quickly." Yet the heavenly poison sage remained deeply trapped within the Dao, intent. Only his expression gained an extra trace of struggle. He had likely also sensed that something was wrong outside, but his consciousness simply could not break free. The lone wolf sage was mildly surprised, squinting. "This formation stone, it looks somewhat familiar." Then he sneered, "I don't know how you woke up, but the others won't be so easy to wake. No one can save you, or that little beast in your arms who nearly ruined my plan." The lone wolf sage's face twisted with savagery as he teleported right in front of Fang Chen. With contained fist force, he attacked Fang Chen ferociously. Since a mere glance can't kill, perhaps the power of his physique would suffice. Who would have thought? The 12 formation stones instantly activated, generating a light barrier woven like rippling water currents. The lone wolf sage's punch struck it, as if sinking into a swamp. His force was deeply mired within. But his physique's power was astonishingly formidable. After a brief pause, that fist forcibly pierced through the light barrier. These 12 formation stones could easily block a 1 calamity expert and even hold off a cultivator at the early stage of 2 calamities. The lone wolf sage bared his teeth in a vicious grin. "It seems you don't know me very well." With that, the fist force pierced through the void, blasting straight toward Fang Chen's skull. The lone wolf sage's vicious grin froze abruptly the next instant, because Fang Chen actually caught his incoming fist with a single palm. The lone wolf sage's fist force had been repeatedly weakened by the 12 formation stones, its power greatly diminished. With Fang Chen's formidable physique at the early 1 calamity level taking it head on was no issue. The lone wolf sage stared in shock, trembling with disbelief. "You, a mere divine transformation cultivator, actually has a physique on par with a sage." Fang Chen gave a cold snort as 3 streams of force, void flux lightning, fire, and earth, surged simultaneously from his palm, and his 5 fingers clenched fiercely. A crisp crack of shattering bone echoed as the lone wolf sage's fist was utterly crushed by his grip. Only then did he say coldly, "You don't know me very well either." The lone wolf sage's expression changed again, shocked and furious. "What power is this? It can actually injure my Dharma body. Interesting." He sneered, a hint of viciousness flashing in his eyes as black bone spikes shot out of his fist without warning, piercing straight toward Fang Chen's hand. Fang Chen reacted fast, but the black bone spikes instantly pierced through the void flux force and stabbed viciously into his flesh. Waves of obscure, sinister, and venomous energy invaded his body, disrupting his power circulation. Fortunately, having visited the Netherworld realm, he was well prepared to deal with such dark, obscure force. With a slight circulation of the void flux lightning force inside him, the invading obscure energy was swept clean. However, the lone wolf sage strike having failed, his cracked fist eerily sprouted dense spikes, like a curled-up hedgehog. Immediately after, the spikes suddenly extended several zhang, madly stabbing in all directions. Forget a full, grown man like Fang Chen, even a rat would have nowhere to hide in this impenetrable forest of spikes. Fang Chen's expression changed slightly. Without hesitation, he tossed the baby into the spatial mirror, then activated his form origin, shrinking his body drastically. Only the shrieks whoosh 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 of breaking air were heard as 7 or 8 terrifying spikes at the last breath almost grazed his body. Fang Chen was inwardly shocked and bewildered. What sort of being is this person? Without even using a demon clan's innate divine ability, his physique alone is this troublesome. If he were to fight with full force, his power would likely reach an even higher level. Fang Chen held nothing back, shouting in a deep voice, "Grand Yan sword array." 9 top-grade spirit swords were summoned with a sound, instantly condensing into a grand sword array that thrust fiercely toward the lone wolf sage. Fang Chen sneered inwardly. Sneak attack, anyone can do that. At such close range, the Grand Yan sword array's momentum was overwhelming, instantly engulfing the unsuspecting lone wolf sage completely. Only a rapid ding-ding-ding sounded. The sword array that should have riddled a 1 calamity sage with holes, upon impacting the lone wolf sage, merely sparked a cascade of sparks. His body was not only unpierced, but was merely sent flying backward by the massive impact, crashing hard into the palace wall. The wall cracked with countless dense fissures, and wisps of lethal poison seeped out. The lone wolf sage, wedged in the wall cracks, looked so grim that water could drip from his face, unable to squeeze out a single smile. The lone wolf sage said darkly, Fine, I've actually been injured by a divine transformation, cultivator. First, Huangfu Naiming, who seeks to take my place, hasn't been found, and now another wants to put me down. Then, I'll get serious. Before he finished speaking, his blood and Kai surged madly, and a terrifying black wolf silhouette flickered behind him. Fang Chen's heart chilled. He knew without thinking that this person's innate divine ability was definitely heaven-defying. Otherwise, how could he be listed on the sacred scroll of the divine capital? Just then, a sage at the palace entrance setting up an array cried out in alarm, "My lord, why have you started fighting?" "The battle aura has leaked. The 3 calamities experts stationed here might have already sensed it." It turned out they hadn't attacked the sages of the Myriad Poisons realm because they feared that any fight would awaken a sage and trigger fierce resistance, alerting that 3 calamities expert. Thus, they had originally planned to set up an isolation array first. But man plans, heaven decides. Fang Chen not only woke up early, but also erupted with terrifying strength at the divine transformation stage, matching a 1 calamity cultivator. The sword array he deployed last emitted an overwhelming sharp aura, which would inevitably trigger the senses of the Myriad Poisons realm's 3 calamities expert. Fang Chen suddenly understood no wonder the lone wolf sage had been fighting only with his physique. He was deliberately suppressing his aura fluctuations. Realizing this, his eyes gleamed. He once again condensed the 9 top Raid Spirit Swords into 1,000 Zhang Giant Sword, thrusting it fiercely upward. But this time, the target was not the lone wolf sage, but the palace's dome. The lone wolf sage's face changed drastically, yelling sternly, "Stop!" With a heaven-shaking clang, the giant sword effortlessly pierced through the palace dome, vanished into the sky, releasing an intensely fierce sword energy fluctuation. Now, not only a 3 calamities expert, but even the divine transformation cultivators on the ground could clearly sense it. The lone wolf sage was instantly enraged, shouting to the others, "Move." The 3 calamities expert would arrive in the space of a breath. There was no time to wait any longer. The 7 Black Abyss Realm experts, long prepared, each pulled out powerful blood, red talismans from their robes, and swiftly stuck them onto the sages of the Myriad Poisons realm. The talismans emitted a remarkable soul fluctuation, undoubtedly precious treasures that restrained the spirit. They actually planned to capture all the sages of the Myriad Poisons realm alive. In the blink of an eye, 7 Myriad Poisons realm sages had been sealed and put into life pouches. Fang Chen's face fell drastically. He knew that by the time the 3 calamities expert arrived, over half of the Myriad Poisons realm sages would likely suffer calamity. But alone, how could he block 9 opponents? In a flash of thought, his eyes lit up, and his gaze fell on the prayer mat where the 3 calamities expert had once meditated in this very palace. Without hesitation, he took out a large iron rod and smashed it fiercely toward the mat. The lone wolf sage saw and instantly understood Fang Chen's intention. That prayer mat contained a deadly poison, even highly lethal to sages. Once released, everyone in the palace would be doomed. The sages of the Myriad Poisons realm all cultivated the path of poison and could endure this toxin, but they, from the Black Abyss realm, would certainly die. The lone wolf sage flew into a rage. "You're courting death." Now exposed, the lone wolf sage no longer held back, suppressing none of his power. Murderous intent surged in his eyes as the pitch black wolf silhouette reappeared behind him. The wolf silhouette's gaze was as indifferent as the heavens, filled with contempt for all living beings. It strode forward, seemingly slow but in reality almost teleporting toward Fang Chen, arriving before him in an instant. Upon closer look, Fang Chen was horrified to discover that the giant wolf's entire black fur was composed of rows of gloomy black tombstones. Some tombstones bore engraved names, others were blank, awaiting their turn. This was no wolf. It was clearly a mobile graveyard reeking of death. The black wolf coldly stared at Fang Chen, its eyes one black and one white, like 2 soul, claiming talismans. Just one glance from it, and Fang Chen felt his limbs turn ice, cold as his soul involuntarily detached from his body, floating lightly as if to be snatched away. Fang Chen's alarm bells rang. This was the law of death. What the lone wolf sage cultivated was actually the pure grand Dao of death. This was an extremely ancient law, a rare great Dao standing alongside time, space, and life. Though he had long suspected that a lone wolf sage who could ascend the divine capital's sacred scroll would possess an extraordinary law, he never imagined it would be this extreme and terrifying. At the critical juncture between life and death, Fang Chen forcibly steadied himself and bellowed, "Heaven and earth harbor righteous Kai, mighty and boundless, spanning past and PR. Ascent below, it carries the spirit of mountains and rivers. Above, it joins the soul of sun and moon. On a path of faithful heart and crimson blood, a blade raised against the setting sun." As the imitation of the grand clarity righteousness mantra was unleashed, the righteous Kai between heaven and earth surged and churned mightily. The black and white pupils that were pulling at Fang Chen's soul suffered an invisible shock, and he seized the chance to wrench his soul free, returning it to his body. The lone wolf sage was taken aback. "What are you chanting? Why does it feel so familiar?" He would never have guessed that the righteousness mantra Fang Chen recited actually originated from those 20 walls, where the surviving inscriptions bore some similar characters. A cold gleam flickered in Fang Chen's eyes. "You ask too many questions." Something within his sleeve slipped soundlessly into his palm. It was none other than the primordial heaven imprisoning gourd. Without a moment's thought, he aimed it at the lone wolf sage and barked, "Lone wolf sage." Against someone so perilous, the cost no longer mattered. With that shout, a slender yellow chain shot out from the gourd, streaking straight toward the lone wolf sage. The latter's face twisted in horror, and he cried out in disbelief, "Realm artifact." Every hair on his body stood on end, his soul trembling violently. A fear from deep in his bones poured through him like an icy spring. What kind of monster had he encountered? Sensing an unparalleled life or death crisis, the lone wolf sage acted decisively, activating his innate wolf shadow and unleashing the law of death. Two deeper black and white beams instantly locked onto Fang Chen. But before the black wolf could drag Fang Chen's soul away, the yellow chain of the primordial heaven imprisoning gourd had already bound the lone wolf sage tightly. Fang Chen only needed to utter the word capture, and he would be sucked into the primordial heaven imprisoning gourd. The lone wolf sage was frightened out of his wits and hastily roared, "Stop." He dared not gamble on whether Fang Chen would capture him first, or he would take Fang Chen's life. Fang Chen also broke out in a cold sweat inwardly. This was the most lethal law he had encountered so far. He could clearly feel that this law possessed the terrifying ability to directly obliterate his soul. Thus, he also dared not make any rash moves. The two sides remained deadlocked, neither daring to make the first move. Furthermore, both parties were burning with hidden anxiety. The lone wolf sage was anxious because time was not on his side. Once a Three Calamities realm expert arrived, he would be doomed. Fang Chen was anxious that if the deadlock continued, the Black Abyss realm might capture more sages from the Myriad Poisons realm. Then, if those captives were used as hostages, the Three Calamities experts would be constrained and might not dare to act against them. At the critical moment, an idea flashed in Fang Chen's mind, and he shouted, "Rebel." With a soft asterisk whoosh asterisk, the surface of the spatial mirror in his embrace rippled, and the rebel poked out his head, his expression extremely solemn. Clearly, even from within the mirror, he had sensed that Fang Chen was in an exceptionally dangerous situation. Fang Chen spoke urgently and gave the decisive order, "Destroy that meditation cushion." Without a second thought, the rebel shot out of the mirror in a flash. The lone wolf sage's face contorted again, and he shouted fiercely, "What are you dallying for? Stop him." The 7 Black Abyss sages had been hesitant to move because of the stalemate between Fang Chen and the lone wolf sage. Now, upon hearing the command, their gazes, as solid as substance, shot toward the rebel like bolts of lightning. The immensely oppressive gaze of sage-level beings would easily blast a mere nascent soul cultivator like the rebel into dust. However, what shocked all the sages was, the rebel grit his teeth fiercely, puffed out his chest and roared, "Stone, breaking chest." The combined, devastating gazes of the sages were completely shattered by him and burst into nothingness. By the time they regained their senses, the rebel had already rushed to the cushion. He once again executed a stone, breaking chest slam, pressing down ruthlessly on the cushion. No one knew what grade of artifact that meditation cushion was, but in the end it could not withstand such a heavy and powerful slam and shattered on the spot. Terrifying purplish, black poisonous mist instantly erupted, billowing and spreading. The rebel was so scared that the dragon whiskers at the corners of his mouth straightened, and he scrambled back into the spatial mirror in a panic. The 7 Black Abyss sages' expressions changed drastically. How could they still care about controlling the Myriad Poisons Sages? They flocked around the lone wolf sage in alarm. What should we do? They too dared not act rashly. If they pushed Fang Chen too far, it would be mutual destruction. The lone wolf sage was a peerless genius who had ascended the divine capital's sacred scroll, the hope of the Black Abyss realm's future, while Fang Chen was merely a divine transformation cultivator. A deal of mutual destruction would be far too disadvantageous. The lone wolf sage's face was icy as he said gravely, "Let's release each other simultaneously. How about it?" Fang Chen snorted coldly. Are you joking? You have how many people, and I have how many? Once released, you'll swarm me. Do I have any chance of survival? You release first, and after I retreat to safety, I'll let you go. Impossible, the lone wolf sage barked decisively. How could he possibly entrust his life to someone else's hands? Moreover, Fang Chen's cunning was no less than his own. How could he trust him? Fang Chen let out a cold laugh. Then we'll just keep dragging this out. The lone wolf sage's face suddenly paled. How could he dare to prolong this? The three calamities expert had yet to arrive, but the poisonous mist in the hole was about to engulf them. Gritting his teeth, he shouted fiercely, "All of you, leave. Scatter across the Myriad Poisons realm to divert the three calamities expert's attention. I'll find a way to escape on my own." The 7 Black Abyss sages were filled with anxiety, but they knew that if the deadlock persisted, the situation would only worsen. They exchanged glances, then rushed out of the hall, breaking through the air and departing. The lone wolf sage turned and shouted, "Now can we release each other at the same time?" Fang Chen shrugged no. "I'll wait for the Myriad Poisons realm's 3 calamities expert to arrive, so I can claim credit." You, the lone wolf sage, was thoroughly enraged. This fellow was like a piece of dog's skin plaster. You couldn't shake off harmless from a distance, but once stuck, nothing but trouble. When the 3 calamities expert arrives, I'll activate my law and kill you. We'll go down together. Fang Chen was unafraid, saying calmly, "Then we'll perish together. I'd be gaining no loss." The lone wolf sage felt like devouring Fang Chen alive. How had he encountered such a troublesome creature? "What exactly do you want? I refuse to believe you're so careless with your life." Seeing that the other had finally lost his composure, Fang Chen revealed his fox's tail, half smiling. "Since you've been to the divine capital, the treasures on you shouldn't be just these, right?" The lone wolf sage laughed out of sheer fury. "Damn it." He had originally come to plunder the Myriad Poisons realm today, but instead he was being robbed by this dog of a bastard right in front of him. Gritting his teeth, he produced half of a tattered scroll, riddled with holes that could no longer be called a painting. This was a pattern that hung in the imperial palace of the great Kayan divine empire long ago. It contains a trace of a saint's might. Though it has no great use in destroying enemies, it can be used for self-defense and might possibly scare off powerful foes. Fang Chen's heart gave a violent thud. Saint's might? For others, this item might indeed only be useful to scare off enemies. But for Fang Chen, it was an unimaginably precious treasure that he could never hope to encounter otherwise. Because within the palm of the Lord of the Yellow Springs lay tightly clenched the blood, ink of the soul-executing brush. To open that palm, Saint's Might was required. Once opened, he could use the brush to again dip into the ink and unleash its terrifying ability to decree death. What made Fang Chen's breath quicken even more was, long ago, the Sword Dao Saint who had passed on teachings to Liu Qingxian had left a trace of power on the brush. That could elevate the brush's power to a whole new level. If there was enough ink and a higher tier power to activate the brush, would the combined might of these two be enough to strike down chaotic ancient blood duke? He forcibly suppressed his excitement, not daring to show a trace of desire, lest the lone wolf sage cautiously retract it. "Is your life only worth a broken painting?" The lone wolf sage gnashed his teeth in fury, still not satisfied. But looking at the rapidly approaching toxic mist, he had no time to waste. He immediately produced another item, a black hedgehog the size of a fist, dead for who knows how long. "Here, take this, is that enough?" the lone wolf sage said, heart aching. Fang Chen frowned. "A dead hedgehog? Do you really have nothing else to give? Wait." He suddenly caught a whiff of a rich pill fragrance that did not belong to any living creature. Upon closer inspection of the hedgehog, his mind roared in shock, and he blurted out, "Is this an 8th-tier heavenly pill?" He remembered that Moon Pearl's big white wrap, it was also an 8th-tier heavenly pill, capable of helping one break through to the Saint Realm. This dead hedgehog before him was very likely an 8th-tier heavenly pill. It merely appeared dead because it had lost its spiritual nature after countless years. This was a heavenly pill that only saints could consume. The lone wolf sage snapped angrily, "If you push your luck any further, you'll get nothing at all." Fang Chen, knowing when to stop, immediately said, "Deal?" The lone wolf sage tossed the hedgehog over and moved to take back the scroll. Fang Chen hurriedly said, "Give me that worthless scroll too. Even a mosquito leg is meat." The lone wolf sage cast a disdainful glance, but didn't ponder further, casually tossing the scroll over. Fang Chen caught it and swiftly stored it in his spatial ring. as the poisonous mist closed in, beginning to corrode their skin. He promptly said, "Release it together." The lone wolf sage nodded heavily. Neither dared to scheme against the other at this critical moment. If they botched it and died in this toxic mist, wouldn't that be a miserable way to go? Retrieve, they both bellowed in unison. Fang Chen withdrew the primordial heaven, imprisoning good, and the lone wolf sage retracted his law of death. Immediately, each employing their own divine abilities, they decisively fled the grand hall before the poison mist could fully engulf them. For safety's sake, Fang Chen didn't venture too far from the grand hall. A three-calamity realm expert was about to arrive. Those dark abyss realm sages absolutely dared not linger nearby. The lone wolf sage appeared in the distance, gazing at Fang Chen's figure from afar, his eyes brimming with overwhelming killing intent. He had never suffered such a humiliating loss before. But just as Fang Chen had predicted, he didn't dare to stay even a moment longer. After casting a vicious glare at Fang Chen, he slowly retreated, his voice icy. "You cur, dare to tell me your name." Fang Chen replied without hesitation, "This old man here is Wang Chung Xiao. Come hack me if you dare, brother." The lone wolf sage clenched his fists. Hearing that tone, he knew it wasn't his real name. There was nothing he could do about this shameless scoundrel. "We'll see about that." He tore through the void and decisively fled. At the same time, the 7 Dark Abyss Realm experts scattered throughout the Myriad Poison Realm also fled in panic, one after another. Fang Chen's expression darkened slightly. It seemed that the Myriad Poison Realm had suffered considerable losses this time, with at least 7 sages captured. This loss at the sage level was second only to the time the ancient giant descended. Only at this moment did the 3 Calamity Realm expert stationed in the Myriad Poison Realm make a belated arrival. It was a woman whose face was covered with purple lumps. She had originally been guarding the realm embryo of the Myriad Poison Realm. When she sensed sage fluctuations in the Grand Hall, she hesitated, fearing a decoy tactic to lure her away, and dared not come recklessly. Only when even the 3 Calamity level poison mist from the meditation mat was released did she realize something catastrophically grave had happened. She rushed into the Grand Hall and swept her sleeve forcefully, only to see that of the original 40 Myriad Poison Realm sages, now only 30 odd remained. A full dozen or more sages had vanished without a trace. The rest were still trapped within the stone steels, unable to extricate themselves. Her face fell, and she sternly barked, "Awaken." This voice pierced straight into their souls, instantly severing the mental link between the crowd and the steels, and one by one, they regained consciousness. After questioning them, the woman immediately understood the situation and raged, "Damned Dark Abyss Realm. They must have allied with the Martial Repository, intending to capture our sage-level experts as a pledge of allegiance. Don't you know, in the coming dark tide, sages and saints are the true main force. If dozens of sages are delivered to them, the Martial Repository will be overjoyed." Upon hearing this, Fang Chen suddenly understood everything. Fortunately, the Myriad Poison Realm had been cautious, leaving a 3 Calamity expert to guard. Otherwise, the goal of those Dark Abyss Realm lone wolf sages would have inevitably included the realm embryo as well. The Heavenly Poison Sage, face full of indignation, roared, outrageous. "Our Myriad Poison Realm's single compassionate thought has brought such calamity. We must pursue immediately and retrieve the captured sages." The 3 Calamity woman forcefully suppressed her anger and said gravely, "It is already too late. Since they dared to come, how could they not have made thorough preparations? Moreover, how do you know they haven't set an ambush outside?" At these words, everyone was horrified. Indeed, the Dark Abyss Realm had only lost 4 3 Calamity experts. Their 2 Calamity and 1 Calamity forces were completely intact. If they had laid an ambush, going out now would be playing right into their hands. The Heavenly Poison Sage fumed, "Damn it, are we just going to let this go?" The 3 Calamity woman said coldly, "Of course not. How can our Myriad Poison Realm swallow this bitter indignation so easily? Once the other 3 Calamity experts return, we shall plan carefully. For now, immediately scour the Myriad Poison Realm to see if those bastards have damaged our vital resources." The Heavenly Poison Sage's face drastically changed. Without even greeting Fang Chen, he vanished in a flash of teleportation. Fang Chen raised an eyebrow, silently pondering, could any of those 7 Dark Abyss sages have visited that valley? The other sages seemed to realize the same thing, their faces all turning ashen, and they teleported away one after another. Not daring to delay, Fang Chen immediately activated the heart of 10,000 Earths and arrived at that valley ahead of everyone. The moment he appeared, scorching serpents of flame coiled towards his face. As he opened his eyes, the entire valley had become a sea of fire. And the source of the flames was precisely the underground library that had housed the countless years of poison path legacies of the Myriad Poison Realm. Every single book had been set ablaze. Fang Chen wasn't surprised at all. The Dark Abyss realm had come to wreak havoc. How could they possibly pass up such a crucial location? A flurry of urgent wind-breaking sounds echoed as the Myriad Poison Realm sages arrived one after another. Amid the scattered firelight, their faces appeared exceptionally grim. The heavenly poison sage stood stunned for a long moment, then suddenly fell to his knees with a thud on the scorched red earth. His head bowed low, white hair disheveled, and said, in a voice of utter desolation, "My scriptures." The other sages were also filled with sorrow. What this fire destroyed was not merely scriptures, but the accumulation of the Myriad Poison Realm since time immemorial, the civilization they had inherited and were meant to pass on to the next generation. Fang Chen couldn't help but ask, were all these scriptures the only copies? One sage said bitterly, our own poison path inheritances are naturally with us, but the poison path legacies here encompass far more than just our generations. Fang Chen then understood there are distinctions even among poison paths. This place held the countless legacies of the Myriad Poison Realm's predecessors, most of which had no inheritors and were never kept within any living body. Now that they were burned to ashes, they had vanished from existence entirely. Even if the Myriad Poison Realm didn't face a civilizational gap, it would at least experience a great decline. The consequences of this library being incinerated were probably even more severe than losing over a dozen sages. The Three Calamity Woman also wore a somber expression, slowly closing her eyes, and sighed. We are unworthy of being called sages. The rest were all filled with self-reproach. If the Myriad Poison Realm could survive the dark tide, future history books would record this heavy mark. The civilization of the Myriad Poison Realm, those countless glorious and flourishing legacies, had been severed in their generation. They were the sinners of the Myriad Poison Realm. Fang Chen stroked his chin, hesitated for a moment, and then spoke. I might be able to restore your scriptures. The heavenly poison sage slightly raised his head, a puzzled look on his face. Even the Three Calamity Woman cast her gaze over, a contemplative look in her eyes. Do you cultivate the Tao of time? Fang Chen shook his head. No, the Tao of time is useless. To reverse such a vast span of time, even the rule of time reversal would require the Three Calamity Realm to have any chance. Fang Chen didn't explain further. The matter of the ancestral Tao was best known by as few as possible. He slowly closed his eyes and quietly activated his fifth domain. An invisible ripple swept out, and the endless, lingering ashes of text that hung in the air were instantly reflected in his mind. How many scriptures had there been in this place? To say tens of millions of volumes would be an understatement. The contents were all encompassing, as vast as the boundless ocean. How could Fang Chen's soul possibly contain such overwhelming knowledge? In just a brief moment, his soul swelled at a terrifying rate, on the verge of bursting apart. Fang Chen was secretly alarmed. He had truly underestimated the civilization of the Myriad Poison Realm. Just as his soul was on the verge of annihilation, he decisively severed his domain. His entire face was deathly pale, thin streaks of blood slowly oozing from his eye sockets, and his whole body drenched in cold sweat. At that moment, his mind throbbed as if about to burst. Yet he forcibly endured the pain, took out a jade slip, pressed it to his forehead, and imprinted all the obtained information into it. About half a tenth, he casually tossed the jade slip to the heavenly poison sage. The heavenly poison sage took it blankly, swept it with his spiritual sense, and immediately saw several tomes he had once read thoroughly. He trembled with shock, scrambled to his feet, and exclaimed in ecstasy, "They're back, they really came back." That woman from the Three Calamities realm instantly teleported over, snatched the jade slip to examine it, and her eyes filled with profound shock. It actually really recovered a portion. She looked at Fang Chen, her deep eyes flickering with uncertainty. What sort of heaven-defying domain is this? To actually be able to reconstruct original texts from ashes. She put away the jade slip, slowly closed her eyes, as if communicating with the saint realm in the unseen. Soon after, a vibrantly colored bottle drifted down from the depths of the heavens, hovering before the woman. Inside the bottle stood a few fresh, verdant willow branches, from which faint traces of pure soul power seeped out. The woman drew out a willow branch, carrying a splash of clear water, and gently sprinkled it over Fang Chen. In an instant, all the swelling in Fang Chen's mind vanished, his expression becoming lucid. The surrounding sages looked on in shock. The heavenly poison sage even cried out, "The Saint's Realm artifact, the 5-colored soul-purifying bottle. Even if a soul is broken into fragments, as long as it hasn't dissipated, it can be restored. The Saint has never used this for us." Gazes toward Fang Chen from the crowd gained a trace of envy, but only envy after all. Fang Chen's soul was damaged because he was trying to restore their Myriad Poisons realms. Destroyed civilization. What harm was there in using the realm artifact on him? Fang Chen himself was also greatly astonished. Even the Saint was stirred into action and lent a realm artifact. However, with the Saint's realm artifact to assist, things became much easier from here on. He activated his domain once more. Instantly, another torrent of vast information flooded into his mind, swelling his soul to the brink of bursting. But this time, he clearly felt that his soul's capacity had seemingly grown a notch stronger. He could not help recalling his previous state when training his physique. It was precisely that pressure beyond the limit that caused a qualitative leap in his body. Now what he was doing was restoring the 10,000-year-old civilization of a middle-tier world, and the strain on his soul could be called devastating pressure. Yet under the effect of the 5-colored soul-purifying bottle, his soul could actually be reborn at the brink of destruction. A bold thought quietly sprouted in his heart. Since the 5-colored soul-purifying bottle can even restore a soul reduced to speckles of light, why not simply challenge the limits? He gritted his teeth, forcibly enduring the soul's agony, allowing more and more information to surge in wildly. The woman's expression changed drastically, and she sternly shouted, "Stop immediately. Your soul won't be able to bear it." Fang Chen acted as if he didn't hear, continuing to bear the burden of even more information. Finally, in the very next instant, his soul burst apart right where he stood. The woman was startled, hastily sprinkling another splash of clear water onto Fang Chen. Only then did the already shattered soul dangerously reassemble once more. "Have you gone mad?" the woman scolded sharply. "If you die here in our Myriad Poisons realm, how will we explain it to your Middle Kingdom?" A trace of pain still lingered in Fang Chen's mind, yet his face was full of smiles, because his soul power had grown yet another notch stronger. After retrieving the jade slip and pouring all the duplicated information into it, Fang Chen activated his 5th domain again. His eyes burning with intensity, he uttered a single word in a clear voice, "Continue." This time, he unreservedly received the endless tidal wave of knowledge just the same. The woman at the side finally discerned the situation, feeling both anger and amusement. She shook her head, sighing, "This fellow, he's actually using our Saint's Realm artifact to temper his soul. I truly don't know if he is too crazy, or if this old woman has fallen behind the times." Such a cultivation method of courting death to seek life truly shook her deeply. Back in her day, even at the divine transformation realm, she would never have had such earth-shattering boldness. Looking at Fang Chen's soul about to burst, the woman gave a soft sigh. A complex look rose in her eyes as she said softly, "Originally, I thought it was a joke that a marquis could emerge from the great Kayan divine kingdom that had been destroyed for 10,000 years. Only now do I understand that the marquis of the great Kayan divine kingdom are truly not granted in vain." At this, the woman seemed to have made up her mind, her tone suddenly deepening. "Fine, this old woman will lend you a helping hand. Let us see just what step this brat soul can ultimately step into." Thus, under the anxious and horrified gazes of the Myriad Poisons Realm sages, Fang Chen began round after round of soul shattering. As experts in poisons, they dealt with all sorts of heaven and earth toxins year-round, and were long accustomed to the agony of poison corrosion. In terms of endurance of pain, they far surpassed ordinary sages. But if they were made to bear the agony of a soul bursting apart, they asked themselves if they would have such courage. The soul is the root of a person. The acute pain directly acting upon the soul far exceeds that from the flesh by 1,000-fold. Under normal circumstances, if their souls burst, even with the 5-colored soul-purifying bottle to restore them, they would surely fall into a long sleep due to the intense pain. Yet Fang Chen before them remained spirited and vigorous time and again, leaving the crowd dumbstruck. The woman of the 3 calamities realm finally perceived a deeper clue, and a wave of disbelief suddenly shot from her eyes. She blurted out, "A sage's physique. How is this possible?" Hearing this, the crowd focused their gazes, penetrating Fang Chen's body, and only then did they notice the peculiarity of his physique. The heavenly poison sage asked in astonishment, without undergoing the baptism of merit, how could a mortal cultivate a sage's physique? The woman from the 3 calamities realm slowly shook her head, her tone full of contemplation. I don't know either. It must surely be an extremely profound Taoist art. She paused, then added firmly, furthermore, he must have undergone inhuman tempering. An expression of sudden realization gradually emerged on the woman's face. Thus, everything finally made sense. The Fang Chen before her was like a piece of fine steel that had undergone endless honing, long since impervious to myriad arts. Threads of appreciation surged uncontrollably from the depths of her eyes. With such great daring and perseverance, what endeavor under heaven cannot be accomplished? As time passed, Fang Chen's soul became like a phoenix bathed in fire, undergoing rebirth after rebirth. Nirvana, amidst destruction, remolded in rebirth. With each cycle, his soul power grew stronger, just like a phoenix nurtured in raging flames, waiting only to soar into the sky. At the very last time, the instant Fang Chen poured all the remaining information into his mind, his soul, swollen to the absolute limit, finally burst apart with a roar. The Three Calamities Realm woman hastily drew out the willow branch and sprinkled the scant remaining pure water onto Fang Chen. The moment the dew, like droplets, fell, Fang Chen's shattered soul was once again restored as before. At this point in everyone's perception, Fang Chen's soul power had already grown to an unbelievable degree. Its intensity had long since far surpassed the level of the divine transformation realm. However, it was still one step short of the true sage realm. The Three Calamities Realm woman showed regret, lamenting, ultimately, it's still just a step away. The vast gulf between divine transformation and sage, how could it be so easily crossed? The other sages also revealed sympathetic expressions. Having endured a full 7 times of the terrifying soul-tearing pain, in the end, he was still one step short. Yet Fang Chen's eyes burned brightly, filled entirely with the light of excitement. Having personally experienced the path of body tempering, he understood better than anyone present how arduous it was to cross from divine transformation into sagehood. He had never expected that just a few rounds of tempering could push his soul straight into the sage realm. That his soul's strength could now far exceed the divine transformation tier had already far surpassed his expectations. The only pity was that his domain usage count was already exhausted. Moreover, he had already carried all the books in this library and could no longer use them to continue his cultivation. Otherwise, if he could undergo such tempering a few more times, there really was hope to break through to the sage realm in one go. Such an opportunity was truly a chance encounter, not to be sought. He duplicated the last batch of canonical texts, handed them to the heavenly poison sage, and said with a smile, "All right, all the canonical texts of your realm are here." The heaven poison sage received it with both hands in extreme gratitude, then deeply bowed. His voice choked with emotion, he solemnly said, "Friend Fang, your great kindness and virtue, the entire Myriad Poison realm shall never forget." Fang Chen not only saved them from the lone wolf sage scheme, but also helped restore their destroyed civilization. Such a favor he truly did not know how to repay. The woman of the Three Calamities realm was silent for a long moment before asking, "Friend Fang, do you have any unfulfilled wishes?" The way she addressed Fang Chen had quietly changed to friend, showing the importance she placed on him. Fang Chen had reaped a bountiful harvest this time. He obtained the ancient painting and an 8th-grade heavenly pill from the lone wolf sage, and also tempered his soul in the library. By the way, theoretically, he could also condense the essence of their poison path from the civilization of the Myriad Poison realm. Perhaps because he had absorbed too much content, that essence had yet to manifest. He smiled lightly and cupped his hands. Fellow Taoists of the Myriad Poison realm are too polite. The Heaven Poison Sage previously did his utmost to aid our Middle-earth. Now, it's my turn to assist you all. It's just a matter of duty. The woman of the Three Calamities realm waved her hand and sighed. How can the two be compared on the same day? Do not confuse them. Her gaze sincere, she pressed again. Speak, what wish do you have? Only by fulfilling your wish can we put down this knot in our hearts. Fang Chen inwardly sighed in admiration. The people of the Myriad Poison realm were unexpectedly pure and straightforward. Except for that Jiang Yishan being a slippery character, the rest truly valued righteousness. Presumably, the lone wolf sage had exploited this very point to successfully lay his trap. If it were a place like the Earth realm, full of deceit and treachery, such a scheme of luring the tiger away from the mountain would never have succeeded. After much deliberation, Fang Chen couldn't help but touch his forehead. His wishes were many, but when it came to the most urgent at the moment, there was only one. He cupped his fists upward and said gravely, "To be honest, this junior is being hunted by the chaotic ancient blood marquis." Whether I can escape his grasp, I have absolutely no confidence. If you all could block him for me for a short while, I, Fang, would be eternally grateful." He had deeply felt the terror of the chaotic ancient blood Marquis. Therefore, he did not dare hope that the Myriad Poison Realm could slay him. He only asked them to delay him for a while. Chaotic ancient blood Marquis. The sages present immediately changed color. How could they not know how dangerous a fierce god who has intimidated the ages truly is? Even the woman of the Three Calamities realm couldn't help but gasp sharply. The title of Chaotic Ancient Blood Marquis alone was enough to make one's heart palpitate with fear. After pondering for a long while, her expression struggling repeatedly, she finally gritted her teeth and said, "Fine. I, on behalf of the other 4 fellow Taoists of the Three Calamities realm, agree. But we cannot guarantee we can definitely stop him." This time it was Fang Chen who secretly drew a cold breath. 5 great powers of the Three Calamities realm joining hands, yet they still weren't confident they could block the chaotic ancient blood Marquis. Yet even though this matter was so difficult, the woman of the Three Calamities realm had still gritted her teeth and agreed. Fang Chen was grateful in his heart and bowed deeply. "This junior first thanks senior for your great kindness." The woman of the Three Calamities realm asked again, "When will he come?" Fang Chen frowned and answered honestly, "This junior also does not know." It was strange. As early as when he was in the Earth realm, the blood seal on his forehead had flickered, indicating he had been locked onto by the chaotic ancient blood Marquis. But until now, more than half a month had passed, yet the blood seal had instead fallen silent. This clearly meant that the chaotic ancient blood Marquis had gone elsewhere and was getting farther and farther away from him. The strangeness of it truly baffled him. The woman of the Three Calamities realm nodded slightly and said no more. She reached into her bosom and took out a leaf of peculiar texture, faintly imbued with toxins. "If you encounter the chaotic ancient blood Marquis in the Myriad heavens, just crush this leaf, and the 5 of us will surely come with all our might." Fang Chen joyfully received that leaf. This was the promise of 5 powerhouses of the Three Calamities realm. This was also the most powerful assistance he had obtained so far. He happily stored the leaf away and cupped his fists again. "Many thanks, senior." Next, Fang Chen looked around at everyone, finally resting his gaze on the Myriad Poisons Sage. He said with a solemn expression regarding the matter of jointly studying the cultivation method, "Allow me to give you a reply later." He couldn't just wait idly in the Myriad Poison realm for the new cultivation method in his mind to take shape. Time is so precious. The Myriad Poisons Sage hurriedly waved his hand. "No need, friend Fang. You helped us restore the ancient texts, and we already owe you too much." As he spoke, he took out a large storage spatial tool and offered it. "Inside are the poison path materials I have accumulated throughout my life. If you later comprehend a cultivation method that allows the puppet to advance further, these materials might be of use." Fang Chen thought for a moment, then accepted it with both hands. "Very well, I'll take it for now and try. If I truly succeed, I will certainly impart the cultivation method to you." After speaking, Fang Chen cupped his fists to everyone in salute. Under their watchful eyes, he raised his hand to tear open the world barrier and leaped into the boundless void. At the same time, in a certain deadly zone deep within the myriad heavens, Wang Chengxiao, his clothes in tatters, scrambled and crawled into an ancient forbidden land. Soon after, heaven and earth abruptly turned a bloody crimson. The chaotic ancient blood Marquis, riding a bone-white warhorse, came galloping from the end of the void. Wang Chengxiao, furious and enraged, roared at the sky, "I am really not Fang Chen." He was so frustrated at this moment, he almost coughed up blood. Having barely escaped from the mob of heroes in the Earth realm by luck, he had intended to continue using Fang Chen's face to swindle and deceive, yet who would have thought he was all'd run straight into a peerless killing god. He exhausted every last bit of his luck just to barely hold on until now, during which time he nearly had his fortune pierced several times, almost falling on the spot. "Damn Fang Chen, you disguise as me and enjoy the good life, while I disguise as you and it's nothing but enemies. Just how many enemies have you fucking made out there?" Wang Chengxi was truly terrified. If you beat him to death, he wouldn't dare impersonate Fang Chen again. Not long after, the chaotic ancient blood Marquis arrived before the Forbidden Land. Seeing that strange region churning with purple mist and faintly containing terrifying silhouettes moving about, he abruptly reined in his horse. The two stared at each other coldly across the Forbidden Land. The oppressive cold light radiating from the chaotic ancient blood marquis made Wang Chen Xiao's scalp tingle endlessly. He hurriedly stripped off all his clothes and vigorously tugged at the skin on his face, shouting, "See for yourself, I have no invisibility treasure, nor a disguise mask. I am the genuine Wang Chen Xiao, not Fang Chen." The chaotic ancient blood marquis's gaze coldly pierced through the purple mist, and a low, ancient voice came from his mouth. "I know." Wang Chen Xiao looked baffled. "Then why are you still chasing me relentlessly?" The chaotic ancient blood marquis stared at him coldly and said darkly, "Intuition, you deserve death more than him." "Damn Wang Chen Xiao's mouth twitched fiercely twice. He said viciously, "If you've got the guts, come in. I'll take you down with me." The chaotic ancient blood marquis, however, had already been gazing into the distance and noticed a black shadow slowly approaching. After a moment of silence, he turned his horse around, raised his spear, and departed. It was not until his figure was about to disappear at the edge of the void that a cold voice that shook heaven and earth rumbled forth. "After I finish killing him, I'll exterminate you." Meanwhile, on the other side, in the void of the myriad heavens, a small black boat raced like a meteor, chasing the moon. Fang Chen steered the boat at full speed toward the martial repository. He took out the tattered ancient painting obtained from the lone wolf sage and the 8th grade heavenly pill, his eyes involuntarily revealing a fervent light. He spread the painting flat on his knees, then took out the severed palm, white as jade at the center, and gently placed it on the painting. That palm, like a parched field that had dried up for endless ages, automatically began greedily absorbing the residual holy might within the painting. Before long, the painting, already riddled with holes and thoroughly decayed, crumbled into fine particles and scattered with the wind. Fang Chen felt a slight regret in his heart. It was a pity that the domain had been exhausted, otherwise he could have properly observed the painting's true appearance. Yet amid the ashes, the fingers of that jade, white severed palm once again loosened a tiny crack, and strands of blood, red viscous liquid slowly oozed out. Moreover, this time it could be faintly seen that within the crack hid a small red ink stick, precisely the executioner's ink he had sought so desperately. Unfortunately, the fingers had not loosened enough to fully extract the entire ink stick. He immediately took out the executioner's brush and quickly absorbed all the red ink that flowed out. In the end, the brush tip was stained to 80%, far more than the 50% from last time. Adding to that the strand of holy power left within the executioner's brush by the one-armed sword saint. If this strike were unleashed, its terrifying power was something Fang Chen dared not even imagine. Moreover, he also had the primordial heaven, imprisoning Gourd and the stasis seed by his side. Fang Chen's heart finally found a sliver of security. Facing the chaotic ancient blood marquis, he might not be completely defenseless. At the very least, if the other party wanted to kill him again, it would never be as effortless as before. After playing with them for a long while, Fang Chen finally put away the verdict pen and the severed hand, then turned his gaze to the 8th grade celestial pill in his palm, which looked like a tiny hedgehog. This item should also be from 10,000 years ago. The pill's potency has greatly deteriorated, and the impurities have completely fused with the effective parts. Impossible to separate, Fang Chen muttered to himself. The wise lone wolf was willing to part with it, most likely because he had no way to deal with this pill. However, for me it may not be so difficult. The corner of his mouth curved up slightly, and he took out the cauldron of mountains and rivers, which he hadn't used in a long time, then crushed the little hedgehog into powder with one palm. Inside, the black and red impurities were mixed together, indistinguishable from each other. Fang Chen threw it all into the cauldron of mountains and rivers, then activated the cauldron. As the small cauldron slowly rotated, wisps of black steam rose and dissipated one after another, until only a red liquid the size of a peanut remained at the bottom, crystal clear and translucent like a magnificent ruby. This is the remaining medicinal effect of the 8th grade celestial pill. I'm afraid it's less than 1/10 of its peak potency. Fang Chen carefully pinched it up and examined it closely. I wonder what profound use this pill has. He dared not rashly swallow an unknown spirit pill. He would wait until he had a chance to clarify its effects. He solemnly put away the red liquid as well. Having dealt with the gains from the Myriad Poison realm, Fang Chen's eyes flickered, and he summoned the Immortal King's indestructible bell, a trace of surprise appearing in his gaze. He had already used the Immortal King's indestructible bell once before, sending it to protect that red willow tree and her child. That was supposed to be the last use, but afterward, the Immortal King's indestructible bell didn't clamor to leave. "Good person, what's the matter?" The little spirit poked half its head out from the bell body and asked in a crisp voice. Fang Chen thought for a moment and said frankly, "The 3 uses you promised me have all been used up." The little spirit tilted its head and said matter-of-factly, "That last time was to protect someone else, so it doesn't count." Oh, Fang Chen was greatly surprised. He carefully recalled and remembered that the little spirit's original words were to protect Fang Chen 3 times. Looking at this simple-hearted little spirit, a slight sense of guilt suddenly welled up in his heart. If he could survive the pursuit of the chaotic ancient blood marquis, he would let it go to seek its original master. According to what it said, it was the Holy Angel's Realm artifact of the Northern Celestial Realm, so its master must be the Holy Angel of the Northern Celestial Realm. And the Northern Celestial Realm was exactly the world where Xia Kaoj resided. When the day came to seek Kaoj, he could conveniently return it to its rightful owner. Fang Chen's expression softened, and he said softly, "Thank you." The little spirit blinked, clearly not understanding why Fang Chen was thanking it, but obediently replied with an "Oh, you're welcome, I'll go back now." Fang Chen smiled faintly, and then put away the immortal king's indestructible bell. Since the little spirit still acknowledged this agreement, then his life-saving talisman still existed. However, relying solely on these to deal with the chaotic ancient blood, Marquis was far from enough. He looked down at his ancestral ring, his gaze heavy as he said in a deep voice, "I cannot live forever in his shadow. I must kill him." And to kill the chaotic ancient blood marquis, there was only one path at the moment: sagehood. However, to break the curse that the ancestral Dao cannot reach sagehood, he had to go to the divine capital and the 4 great realms, and find the answer in their ancient records. Hopefully, the martial repository could answer everything. Just as he was thinking, Fang Chen suddenly felt a scorching heat on his forehead. That long, unseen blood character actually began flickering intermittently again. The chaotic ancient blood marquis was locking onto him again. Lingering ghost, Fang Chen's heart grew cold, and he decisively put away the black small boat, instead using the void wings, and without hesitation, consumed the holy angel's blood. Odd to push the wings to their limit. However, the blood character on his forehead did not stop flickering because of this. Instead, it beat more and more frequently. His heart grew even colder. According to past experience, once the blood character completely solidified into shape, it meant that the chaotic ancient blood marquis could fully lock onto him and descend across SS boundary annihilation strike. Fang Chen gritted his teeth and continued to push the void wings to their utmost limit, fleeing madly. A day later, he was shocked to find that the flickering of the blood character on his forehead showed no sign of weakening, but instead was beating even faster. This indicated that the distance between the 2 sides was constantly shrinking. He can actually chase so fast, Fang Chen was secretly alarmed. The chaotic ancient blood marquis had hunted him before, but his speed had never been this terrifying. This time, he was truly enraged, determined to take Fang Chen down. Fang Chen clenched his jaws, a cold light bursting from his eyes. Our grudges should also be settled. Let's see whether you kill me first, or I step into sagehood first. He unfolded the void map to confirm the distance to the martial repository, and found that traveling at full speed with the void feather robe, he could arrive in just 2 days. Once he stepped into the range of the martial repository, the chaotic ancient blood marquis would not dare to attack recklessly. Without further thought, he dashed at full speed. Another day passed, and the blood seal on Fang Chen's forehead no longer throbbed as frequently, only flickering occasionally. The distance between them was even closer. It was feared that before reaching the martial repository, the chaotic ancient blood marquis would catch up. Half a day later, Fang Chen was already not far from the martial repository. He could even see faint rays of light scattering from the martial repository realm in the distant depths of the void. But at that very moment, the blood seal on his forehead completely stabilized. The chaotic ancient blood marquis had already fully locked onto his position and could at any time hurl an annihilation spear across the void. The road ahead might not be finished by him. And there were some things he had yet to do. Fang Chen gritted his teeth slightly, and while speeding along the road, he separated a wisp of his mind to enter the space mirror. As soon as he entered, a loud wail of crying pierced his eardrums. He looked closely and saw a painting heart holding a baby, pacing back and forth, gently patting its back while softly coaxing, "Oh, don't cry, do you want milk?" "But I don't have any. Rebellious brat, you come here." Beside her, rebellious brat was tightly covering his 2 small ears, his brow furrowed into a line from the ear-piercing cries. Rebellious brat immediately widened his eyes and shouted, "What nonsense are you talking? I've never even eaten it. Where would I get some to feed it?" As he spoke, he and Painting Heart simultaneously turned their gaze towards the human cocoon Linglong, their eyes darting straight to a certain ample area. Linglong, who had been hanging upside down for a month or two, subjected to countless brutal beatings without making a sound, now involuntarily shuddered. She glared and said, "What are you looking at me for? I don't have any either." Just then, the baby sensed Fang Chen's consciousness arriving and immediately stopped crying, leaping up to pounce toward Fang Chen's consciousness. Since it was a void consciousness, this pounce naturally missed. The little thing then burst into loud wails again. Fang Chen merely felt a headache and quickly said, "Quickly, fetch 100-year-old celestial treasure from the life-giving soil nursery." The baby hugged the spirit herb with its chubby arms and immediately broke into laughter, giggling happily. Rebellious brat rubbed his ears, grumbling, "This little thing can really yell, almost annoyed me to death." Painting Heart, meanwhile, collapsed wearily into a chair, sighing, "I'll never have children in this life. It'd really shorten my lifespan." Fang Chen rolled his eyes at her, thinking to himself, "She's just a remnant soul. How much lifespan does she have to speak of anyway?" His gaze finally landed on Linglong. This trip was precisely for this woman. Fang Chen spoke coldly, a few traces of impatient chilliness surfacing in his eyes. "She still refuses to confess." The soul of the master of Fang Mountain, first-grade pavilion, was still sealed in the crystal ball, and this woman had stubbornly refused to reveal the incantation. Now, with his life and death tribulation imminent, he had no more time to wait. Linglong gritted her silver teeth and said spitefully, "You humiliated me so. I'd rather die than hand it over." Fang Chen did not say much. With a mere thought, that evil sword flew in, and with a flash of cold light, directly pressed against her neck. His eyes were icy, and he said in a deep voice, "My final hour may be near, and I have no more time to play with you. Though I do not know what relationship you truly have with Xia Keoj, if you really mean to harm the master of Fang Mountain first-grade pavilion, then I can only send you on your way as your funeral accompaniment." Linglong held back her stubborn words, truly feeling the murderous intent emanating from Fang Chen, but submitting to him was simply impossible for her. She snorted through her nostrils and said, "Beg me, beg, and I'll tell you the incantation for the crystal ball." "Beg you." Fang Chen fell silent, actually contemplating it. With another thought, the crystal ball sealing the Tower Lord's soul was drawn into the spatial mirror. Gazing at the Tower Lord inside, eyes tightly shut in deep slumber, an infinite wave of self-reproach surged within his heart. The Tower Lord had been reduced to ashes because of him, and it was also because of him that she fell into Linglong's hands. Now, would he really forsake the Tower Lord for the sake of his momentary pride? He looked at the rebel, then at Hua Xin, and said solemnly, "Before I meet my end, I will release you and ask you to bring the Tower Lord's soul back to the Central Plains, to Delhi. Deliver it to the Sage of the Compassion Mirror." The rebel was taken aback, and even Hua Xin's eyes snapped open. Hua Xin asked suspiciously, "What kind of heaven-shattering trouble have you run into?" In her memory, the dangers Fang Chen had faced were not 100, but at least 99, most of them utterly lethal. But when had she ever seen him entrust his affairs like this? How dire must the danger be? Fang Chen said calmly, "Only one chance in 100 to survive. In any case, do as I instruct. Rebel, after returning to the Central Plains, you are free to go as you please. As for Hua Xin, I will give you the Hell Soul Bell shortly. Find your own way to break the shackles of your body." Hua Xin's expression grew heavy. He was truly arranging his last affairs. She asked, "Can I help?" Fang Chen looked at her with slight surprise and smiled. "Shouldn't you be wishing for my death?" Hua Xin wrinkled her delicate nose and said peevishly, "You heartless thing, when you were in the Hell Realm, did I ever try to kill you?" That was true. Back when he was stranded in the Hell Realm, Hua Xin had led the entire Dream Demon clan's experts to intercept him, yet none had ever truly tried to kill him. Although Hua Xin had always been imprisoned by Fang Chen, their relationship had been mostly one of mutual cooperation. Moreover, Hua Xin was the one Fang Chen had brought out of the Attic world, a companion who had journeyed with him to this day. Imperceptibly, a bond of friendship had grown between them. He smiled slightly and said, "Thanks." The great enemy this time is the ancient Chaos Blood Marquis, a ferocious figure whose might has dominated for eons, known as a half-step saint. If my luck holds, I might survive. If not, I'll likely meet my end in the void. Ancient Chaos Blood Marquis, Hua Xin's heart trembled slightly. If it was him, then Fang Chen was truly in grave danger. Hua Xin's eyes filled with a complex, unreadable meaning, and she said softly, "Then take care of yourself." Fang Chen nodded and finally fixed his gaze on Linglong, asking, "If I beg, you'll give me the incantation, right?" Linglong snorted. I keep my word. Fang Chen took a deep breath. He had almost never begged anyone in his life. This would be the first time and the last. As his lips parted about to speak, the infant who had finished absorbing the spirit herbs opened his big eyes wide, first looking at Fang Chen, then at the hanging cocoon. The little guy said curiously, "Uncle and this worm are so strange. One thinks, once I get the incantation, I'll butcher you." Fang Chen's expression froze instantly. He cursed inwardly, "Damn, I forgot to shut this little brat up. This is a disaster." Sure enough, Linglong exploded in fury upon hearing this. "You cur, I knew it." Before she could finish, the infant continued, "And this worm thinks, even if you beg, I won't tell you, to piss you off. You'd never dream that the incantation is this lady is the most beautiful." Linglong froze abruptly, then exclaimed in shock, You can hear my inner thoughts." She was an 8-winged great angel. The thoughts deep in her heart should have been able to shield against all secret arts of mine, reading in the world, yet they couldn't stop a mere infant. Fang Chen also paused, then raised an eyebrow. "What did you just say? What was the incantation? This lady is the most beautiful." Linglong squirmed anxiously, shouting, "It's false, false. I swear on my name, it's absolutely false. Don't you dare try it." Fang Chen took the whip from the rebel and lashed her with it, causing her to howl in pain. He sneered, "Behave, you cunning woman. I bet even the name Linglong is fake." However, her violent reaction was a clear case of protesting too much. Why did it feel like she was actually hoping he would recite the incantation? A glint of shrewdness flashed through Fang Chen's eyes as he placed the crystal ball between Linglong's breasts and wedged it there. Linglong froze. "What are you doing?" Fang Chen didn't answer, simply moving behind Linglong to hide. There was no better meat shield against a blast than the body of an 8-winged great angel. For extra safety, he then summoned 12 formation stones to protect himself in front. Seeing this, Hua Xin and the rebel exchanged a glance, then one after the other crouched behind Fang Chen. Even the infant was stunned for a moment, then immediately crawled over and crouched behind the rebel. Linglong nearly exploded with rage and cursed, "You bastards, you're all cut from the same cloth. Don't recite it, the incantation is real. But so is the trap." Fang Chen's heart sank. Of course, this woman wasn't honest. He raised his hand and gave her another lash, scolding, "Damn woman, you still wanted me to beg you. Are you going to beg now?" Linglong wailed continuously, no longer daring to be stubborn, because her greatest reliance, the Fang Mountain first-rank pavilion lord, was gone. She cooed, "Sir Fang, for the sake of Keoj, let me off this once, I beg you." Fang Chen got angry the moment he heard this. She had been stubborn for a month or two, and now that her support was gone, she immediately caved. Truly a master of adapting to circumstances. He gave her another lash, sneering, "Sorry, I still prefer your defiant and unruly look." Linglong again let out a wail. "Aya, you've gotten what you wanted. Why not let me go?" Fang Chen snorted coldly. "Forget it. If you cooperate honestly, I might let you off before I die. Now, face the ancient chaos blood Marquis with me." With that, he threw down the whip and, carrying the crystal ball, returned to the outside world. He raised his hand and flung the crystal ball to the very edge of sight, then chanted the incantation, "This lady is the most beautiful." A crisp crack rang out, and a violent storm erupted from within the crystal ball, radiating out in all directions without warning. The shockwave, even at such a vast distance, made Fang Chen's figure sway unsteadily. He shuddered to imagine the power at the center. That had to be a full power strike sealed inside by Linglong. Once the storm subsided, Fang Chen rushed forward and retrieved the crystal ball from the center of the explosion. With the incantation broken, his consciousness could easily probe inside, and the suspended heart in his chest finally settled. He murmured, "Tower Lord, if I survive this calamity, I will go to South Kayan to seek out the Imperial Jade Seal for you, to suppress the aura of the Grand Tao." With this lingering worry resolved, Fang Chen had no more concerns and raced toward the armory. Time passed moment by moment. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours flew by in an instant. Every hair on Fang Chen's body stood on end as he remained constantly vigilant against the ancient chaos bloodmar, key blood lances that could strike from afar. He would only have an instant, as fast as lightning, to summon the immortal king Indestructible Bell. The slightest mistake would lead to body and soul perishing. Gazing at the increasingly bright void horizon, he did not relax in the slightest, only feeling an indescribable pressure bearing down like a collapsing mountain. It was as if, in the darkness behind him, lurked an ancient beast, ready to leap out and swallow him whole at any moment. A hoarse, low growl escaped through Fang Chen's tightly clenched teeth. Only 3 hours' journey left. His jaw muscles, clenched for so long, were sore and trembling so much he could barely form words. Life and death, success or failure, all hinged on these final 3 hours. 1 hour passed, the ancient Chaos Blood Marquis Lance did not come. 2 hours later, it still didn't come. 3 hours later, it still hadn't come. And in the dark void, an endless line of brilliant light abruptly appeared at the edge of sight. Like Pangu cleaving heaven and earth, marking the first rift between heaven and earth. It was a new life. It was hope. Inside the spatial mirror, Hua Xin and the rebel, who had also been mentally taught, finally showed expressions of relief. Hua Xin let out a long sigh of relief and said with emotion, "We've reached the armory. The ancient Chaos Blood Marquis ultimately couldn't catch up. That kid has scraped by with his life again." The rebel patted his chest vigorously, scared. That scared the baby to death. I thought Big Brother was really going to bite the dust for good. Fang Chen's heart also quivered softly. The 3 days of escape felt like a lingering nightmare. In the final day, every minute and second felt like being a prisoner on the execution block, torment to the extreme. Those with slightly weaker resolve might have already collapsed mentally and given up fleeing. Fortunately, he had gritted his teeth and persevered all the way, finally arriving outside the armory. However, he dared not relax in the slightest. The more critical the moment, the greater the need for caution. This was a style etched into his very bones. With a sharp whoosh ripping through the air, the void feather robe trembled violently, and in a single teleport he arrived outside the armory. The vastness of the armory world far exceeded his expectations. Looking left and right, he couldn't see its edges at all. Looking inward, the land stretched boundlessly, without limits. The Dust-Free Realm, Ice Realm, Netherworld Realm, Earth Realm, Mystic Heaven Realm, and even the intermediate Poison Realm he had visited before combined, they were but a corner of the armory. The 4 great worlds truly lived up to their fame. Without time to think, he raised his hand and blasted at the world barrier. To his surprise, even with his physique at the early One Calamity stage, he only made the world barrier tremble slightly. Fang Chen was stunned and thought in shock. As expected of a great world, its world barrier is far stronger than ordinary worlds. His heart instantly grew stern. Vaguely, a bone, chilling, cold, silently spread in his heart. He whipped his head around to look at the dark void behind him. Was the Blood Marquis of Ancient Chaos catching up? Having finally reached the armory with such difficulty, if he were blocked outside the world barrier and couldn't enter, wouldn't his death be absurd beyond measure? He resolutely summoned the Void Tribe, condensed it in his palm, and with his formidable physique, once again fiercely blasted the world barrier. This time, the barrier was finally blasted open, revealing a pitch-black crack. Though not large, it was enough for Fang Chen. He shouted in a low voice, "Origin of form." His body instantly shrank rapidly, and like a streak of light, he whooshed through the crack. A short while later, a refreshing, soul-penetrating air forcefully flooded his lungs. Vast clouds of spiritual energy blew past him, making every hair on his body stand up in comfort. His heart, which had been hanging in suspense, finally settled completely at this moment. He had escaped to the armory and succeeded in being saved. The heaven-defying danger he had anticipated had ended so easily, giving him an intense sense of unreality. Recalling the tasks he had entrusted to Hua Xin and the rebel, he couldn't help but smile wryly. Since he had survived, he would cherish this one chance at life and devote himself to studying how to become a sage. However, when he opened his eyes to survey his surroundings, he was astonished to find that heaven and earth were drenched in a thick, bloody crimson color. The sky, the earth, the grasses, the trees, the mountains, all were as if soaked in blood. An ominous aura of destruction reverberated ceaselessly between heaven and earth. This is the blood moon light of the Blood Marquis of Ancient Chaos. Fang Chen's mind fell into a brief daze. Was he hallucinating? Or had he not entered the armory at all? How could the Blood Marquis of Ancient Chaos appear within the armory? Suddenly, the heavy clop-clop of horse hooves echoed, as if striking directly upon the heart. All things between heaven and earth instantly fell into dead silence. The roar of rushing rivers ceased abruptly. The cries of insects and beasts vanished in an instant. Even the clamorous wind died into nothingness. It was as if a great terror capable of annihilating the world had descended. Fang Chen's heart spasmed violently at the sudden sound of hooves. His pupils kept contracting until they became like pinpricks. In his line of sight, a blood moon rose slowly from the horizon. A tall skeletal warhorse, treading upon the crimson blood moon, came clopping forward. Upon its back, a black cloak billowed and snapped. A man in iron armor, radiating monstrous killing intent, held a terrifying blood spear in hand. It was clearly the Blood Marquis of ancient chaos. After that one close encounter outside the Central Earth, they now met again. The difference was, back then Fang Chen had been utterly powerless before the Blood Marquis of ancient chaos, like a fish on a chopping block. Without the Grand Libationer's desperate protection, and that mysterious power that blocked his fatal strike, Fang Chen would have long been reduced to ashes. Now Fang Chen's physique had already achieved sagehood, and he had some hidden trump cards. Although still vastly outmatched, he now had the strength to tear off a chunk of his flesh. Fang Chen suppressed the surging fear in his heart. Whether he feared or not, the opponent would not give him a way to live. Better to fight to the death. Fang Chen summoned the immortal king's indestructible bell, gripped the condemnation brush, and sneered, "I found it odd. You're faster than me, so why were you behind me? Turns out you arrived at the armory before me, and were waiting here." The Blood Marquis of ancient chaos rode over, his voice still as cold as ice. "You are the only person to have escaped from my grasp 3 times. Those 3 times, once when Fang Chen broke through to the nascent soul realm and encountered a blood thunder attack, he intervened with a projection across worlds. Once he attacked ferociously right after Fang Chen's great battle with the young emperor had ended. The last time when Fang Chen fled into the southern heaven realm, and his fatal blow was blocked by the giant king of 9 suns. Fang Chen gave a mocking laugh. "So this time you won't attack across worlds, but up close, leaving me no chance to escape." The Blood Marquis of ancient chaos said coldly, "This time no one will save you." Fang Chen tightly gripped the condemnation brush and said, "As if you're certain you can kill me." Feeling the increasingly scorching blood character mark on his forehead, his tone deepened. "Before you strike, I want to ask one question. Is Blood Marquis of ancient chaos your true title?" Huixin once said that the Blood Marquis of ancient chaos was a marquis personally enfeoffed by the great Kaiyan divine empire 10,000 years ago. But back then, how could the great Kaiyan divine empire have conferred the character's ancient chaos? The Blood Marquis of ancient chaos said indifferently, "You need not know." Then it wasn't his real title. Fang Chen understood and couldn't help but mock himself. "I was careless. I forgot that a conferred marquis has the privilege to ignore world barriers and freely enter and exit any world." The Blood Marquis of ancient chaos, he too was a marquis. He had overlooked this. Before, he hadn't entered the Central Earth only because the Cloud Wasteland ancient saint made him wary, not daring to come in. The Blood Marquis of ancient chaos remained as indifferent as ever. "Now you know, and it's not too late." He raised the blood spear in his hand, pointing it at Fang Chen from afar, his voice falling like the swing of Death's scythe. "You should die." In the next instant, Fang Chen felt as if the blood moon appeared before his eyes out of nowhere, and the blood spear had already stabbed to the tip of his nose. This strike seemed to have pierced through time itself, giving him absolutely no chance to react. A layered, metallic explosion resounded with a boom, as the immortal king's indestructible bell automatically protected its master at the most critical moment, instantly enveloping him within. The blood spear struck the bell, causing its tolls to erupt loudly. The resulting shockwave of destruction ripped up the ground before it. The sky for tens of thousands of miles around was torn apart, all space shattered. The multicolored world barriers were fully exposed, and, under the continuous tolling shockwaves, exploded into colorful powder. Fang Chen, inside the great bell, gazed at this apocalyptic scene, his heart filled with unspeakable shock. Just one strike possessed such divine might. The Blood Marquis of ancient chaos remained indifferent, a mere realm artifact, and you think you can save your life. The skeletal warhorse beneath him suddenly kicked its hooves and erupted with fearsome power. The immortal king's indestructible bell, pushed by the blood spear, shot backward like a meteor. The momentarily subsiding tolls erupted once again in a frenzy. Fang Chen, inside, felt his Dao body racked by tearing pain. If he still had his old spirit transformation body, he would have long been shaken into a mist of blood. He discerned the Blood Marquis of ancient chaos's intention, to drag them into a battle within the void world. It was true that the Blood Marquis of ancient chaos could freely enter and exit the Myriad realms, but once inside, fighting within a world still gave him some reservations, especially the 4 great worlds. A cold glint flashed in Fang Chen's eyes, and battle intent surged throughout his body. "As you wish." He gripped the condemnation brush and wrote swiftly in the air, quickly penning a complete and sharp death character. Back when Fang Chen broke through to the nascent soul realm, it was with this condemnation brush that he annihilated the blood marquee of ancient chaos's projection in one stroke. Now the brush reappeared, its power far surpassing the past, beyond comparison. The sharp death character flew from the brush's tip, transforming in the air into a sky, covering giant curtain, pressing forward with overwhelming darkness. The giant curtain swelled madly, expanding in the blink of an eye to seem like a small world, pressing the surrounding void with nowhere to hide. In those indifferent eyes of the blood marquee of ancient chaos, a faint ripple finally appeared as he slowly uttered a few words, the might of a sage. He sharply flicked the reins, and the warhorse beneath him let out a deep, muffled neigh. The dark blood moon beneath the warhorse's hooves erupted with blinding bloodlight, then transformed into a blazing sphere of blood, charging headlong into that death-ruined sky canopy. This was unmistakably the chaotic ancient blood marquee-killing blow, Burial Moon. Beneath the death-ruined shroud, all vitality was extinguished. Whether living beings of flesh and blood or long, dead wandering souls, all were reduced to absolute silence. The surface of that blood orb rapidly sprouted vast patches of decay, its entire form darkening at a visible speed. Immediately after, a sticky, bone-grating sound rang out as the putrid flesh dissolved into black sludge, peeling off from midair in a cascading torrent. Looking closely, within that black mire, countless sage remains and dried essence blood were steeped. It turned out this so-called blood moon was nothing but a supremely evil artifact formed from the corpses of mighty experts the chaotic ancient blood marquee had slain over 10 millennia. It was both the glorious symbol of his 10,000-year slaughter and the crucial foundation of his cultivation. That he had been able to so swiftly catch up to Fang Chen when he left Dak-ing earlier was likely also thanks to the eerie power condensed from the countless experts' corpses. Fang Chen, seeing this, couldn't help but darken his expression. Although that blood moon had been destroyed by his executioner's brush, the death rune had also dimmed considerably. The power of that single stroke should have been enough to suppress and kill any sage of the Three Calamities realm, and even posed a fatal threat to the chaotic ancient blood marquee himself. But who could have expected that the blood moon had such a horrifying origin? At this moment, facing the death-ruined sky canopy that had already dimmed significantly, the chaotic ancient blood marquee held his blood, colored long spear in one hand, and drew a in knee across the void from afar. 1,000 jang long blood shadow slash swept across, crushing even the surrounding void into inward collapse. That death rune was ripped open with a hideous, gaping breach, its light so dim it was almost imperceptible to the naked eye. When this shattered death-ruined sky canopy passed through the chaotic ancient blood marquee and his warhorse, it merely drained a small portion of their life force, leaving not a single real wound. The chaotic ancient blood marquee cold, sharp gaze pierced the void as he spoke grimly. "You destroyed my blood moon. Now your flesh and Dao bone shall reforge it." Before his words even faded, he thrust his long spear through the air, a chilling aura firmly locking onto all of Fang Chen's vital points. In an instant, Fang Chen's body jolted violently. Beneath his resilient Taoist robe, dozens of tiny lacerations suddenly split open on his skin, and bright red blood immediately seeped out. Just that single thrust through the air held such ferocious might. If truly struck by the spear, how could anyone survive? Yet, far from showing any fear, an even fiercer fighting spirit blazed in Fang Chen's eyes. He violently wiped the blood dripping from the gash on his cheek and coldly roared, "Then come." As his voice fell, he inhaled deeply, and a surge of vast, noble energy swelled within his chest and abdomen. This was precisely the righteous energy of heaven and earth he had cultivated by silently reciting the grand clarity, noble spirit art day and night over these past few days. His eyes burst with sharp light as, speaking with the authority of heaven, he spat 4 more words, "Tao, declare thy true name." This was the supreme essence of the Confucian path. Words become law. As the 4 words left his mouth, an intangible, formless, icy ripple instantly seeped into the void, slicing like lightning through the chaotic ancient blood marquee body.